So on August 2nd, Kansas voters will go to the polls in the first election nationally since the overturning of Roe v. Wade that puts abortion on the ballot. And we're joined now by Brandi Calvert from Wichita, Kansas. She's campaigning against this amendment. Brandi, thanks so much for joining us on Rising.
Thank you both for having me.
And so tell us, what specifically will this amendment do?
If passed, the amendment would allow a full abortion ban in the state of Kansas.
So starting from where, what are the details? Like starting from conception, starting from implantation, a couple weeks, just straight up ban.
It can be a full ban. Kansas is already heavily regulated as far as our abortion regulations. Currently, abortions can't happen after 22 weeks of gestation. And this would be, there's no limit. They could ban it from conception, yeah.
So I'm obviously on the anti-abortion side of this question, but I am curious if this issue you've noticed as sort of major steps in a red state like Kansas start to be taken. Have you noticed that this is energizing a lot of people? Ryan actually profiled you in a great story a few years back about how the Trump era really animated you and energized you and got you into activism. Have you noticed that post-Roe, when some of these laws are on the table and are sort of like becoming a reality in different states, are you seeing a big uptick in energy among activists basically on your side?
Yeah, it has brought life to a whole new wave of activists. But what's really interesting here is that it isn't just liberals or Democrats. This is bringing out Republicans, libertarians. It's activating everyone on this one issue that we typically wouldn't really come together on.
And that's interesting because Republicans, like the suburban mom demographic is has become a key one where Democrats and Republicans in the Trump era, Democrats are able to siphon away some support that typically would have gone to Republicans because a lot of educated women in suburbs were morally offended by Donald Trump, and it was extremely animating for them, and they started voting Democrat. And I think Democrats see this issue as one that can do that as well. Has that been your experience just in these last few weeks as you're organizing and working on these issues in Kansas?
We've had everyone kind of join and want to participate, want to help any way they can. Of course, a lot of suburban moms, as you put it, yes, they're coming out in full force, which is wonderful.
What's the polling look like on this? And what are the kind of what are the pundits out there saying, and does it match what you're seeing on the ground?
I think it's really up in the air across the board. For this primary, unaffiliated and independents can vote, which, that's a third of our voters in Kansas are unaffiliated independent voters. So that alone, I think we're going to see a massive turnout that we haven't seen before in a primary election.
Can you tell us, and Ryan obviously wrote about this in his Intercept story, which folks should go read, but can you tell us a little bit more about your background? Because Ryan was talking to me how he was like, it's a little bit of the flip side of the coin, because you hear so much in the media about how the Trump era took, certain people that may have been on the left and brought them over to the right and got them really energized and, animated to support Donald Trump, sort of a strange turn of affairs that became kind of media fodder. But in your story, this era is really what got you, involved in activism and energized and working on these issues. Can you tell us a little bit about, why it was that you were so eager to start getting involved in this moment?
I think anytime you witness injustice, it motivates you to voice your opinion on what is and do what is right. It wasn't a difficult choice to make to jump in and do what I could on the ground level here in Wichita. And luckily, thousands of other women just like me felt that very same way, and they also jumped right in. But what's interesting is we have a whole new wave right now since Roe v. Wade has been overturned. There's a whole new wave of activists that are being born. I mean, they're registering voters, they're on the ground, they're doing the work, and it's really incredible.
And yeah, no, I'm curious about that because to Emily's point, you were among kind of millions of mostly women who, after the Trump election went from the sidelines, and got heavily invested in politics. You helped or led the organizer of the Wichita Women's March. You were pushing, hard all the way through the 2018 midterms. I started feeling by the end of 2020, early 2021, an enormous amount of exhaustion from people, and cut through with a lot of cynicism as well. Like we fought this hard for all of this, and now Democrats in Washington aren't fighting for us. So how does that exhaustion and that cynicism intersecting with Roe being overturned? Is the existential crisis enough to get? Is it getting people back engaged despite Democratic Party fecklessness, or is that fecklessness still just kind of dissuading a decent number of people from getting involved? Or does the fact that it's literally on the ballot, like you don't need the Democrats at all, like the words
Right.
are on the ballot themselves, is what the difference is?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely are all a bit tired, but we haven't lost energy. If anything, this has really energized us, given us a new breath of we have to get out there and do what we have to do, regardless of Democrats. I mean, I think we can all agree at this point that the fighting between Democrats and Republicans, they're using our freedoms as their weapons. It doesn't matter if I don't think it matters if it's Democrats showing up or Republicans showing up. We're showing up as the constituents.
One thing from the sort of anti-abortion perspective that I'm curious about is whether, because a lot of people on the right think the political handicap for the pro-choice side is the sort of full abortion through full 3 trimesters all the way. That is the liability on the left right now. So like the more you talk about abortion, actually it has this counterintuitive effect where because Democrats support that the full 3 trimester position on abortion, becomes a liability, even if most Americans are supportive of first trimester abortion access. Have you sensed that? Have you found that it's difficult to talk about it in that context, or is that something that you run into at all when you're organizing and talking to people on the ground?
Not really. Our mentality and our goal here has been to not really what anyone's opinion on abortion are, but the fact that we can't allow government to control any more of our autonomy. We can't allow our government to put mandates or bans on our persons. So it's been more of a medical freedom issue than what your personal opinions are on abortion.
And last question, I know we got to run. What's your sense of what the energy has been on the right? Like, did Roe sap some of the energy because they're like, well, we won, we can relax now, or are they in full like drive it to the wall mode?
I think they thought it would be a really easy win, and I know they're getting very nervous now. We had a march last Saturday where a couple thousand people showed up, and there have been people protesting and rallying every day since Roe was overturned, trying to get our constituents educated on the August 2nd ballot, trying to fact check the misinformation that is currently out there regarding what this amendment would mean, what it currently means, and what our laws currently are on abortion. Like I said, we're heavily regulated. in the country, Kansas has very strict regulations on abortions here anyway. So getting the word out, trying to educate people on August 2nd, what it will look like, what it means, and just getting them out to vote. We've seen a massive turnout. And again, it hasn't just been from Democrats. It has been, the Kansas Libertarian Party has turned out and showed up in full force. We've had several Republicans show up and putting these signs in their yard. So I think they were under the impression that it would be an easy win for them. However, Kansas is very supportive of medical freedom.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if that the kind of whole vaccine debate is kind of intersecting with it. Are you seeing that? I noticed your
Definitely.
use of the word mandates. Yeah, so it is like the hostility to the vaccine mandates is actually playing into the
Definitely
people's posture toward this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Republicans in Kansas are very supportive of medical freedom. So I don't think they're going to have the turnout on the Republican ticket for this primary that they thought they would. Because you can't say we don't want a mandate, but we're okay with a ban.
Super interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, no, I've seen the argument tried to be deployed from the other perspective. Like, how can you be for a vaccine mandate when you're also, you're okay, but you won't allow a mandate on abortion. It's interesting to see it working in the opposite direction. Yeah.
Because many of us weren't supportive of a vaccine mandate for that very reason. So I know Kansas is a red state, but we're definitely a different shade of red than I think what the country acknowledges.
Especially, I think probably Beltway media gets that wrong a lot. Brandi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. We'll be back with more Rising right after this.